Okay, smart contracts might still sound very confusing, and I have to admit it's a weird concept. But let's go through an example. One smart contract you might have is a simple escrow. For this example, let's assume it has only 3 functions. First, assume you are buying something online, but you are not trusting the seller. Quite often the case, right? But now with the smart contract, you can deposit your payment in the form of Ether for the seller address on the smart contract. But there's a catch. The seller cannot withdraw the money yet. Neither can anyone else withdraw the money, including you as the depositor. Now, the seller sees the funds in the contract and knows those funds cannot go anywhere but to his own address later on. Second, once the seller has sent the product in the real world and you have received it, you as the buyer can enable the withdrawal for the seller in the smart contract by calling unlock. And thirdly, now the seller can call the withdrawal function to receive the Ether. So that's what will happen on a high level. But what does happen on the blockchain? The seller sends out a transaction that looks like this. So the transaction is sent with the smart contract address as recipient. Because remember, smart contracts are just automated accounts and have their own address. And the data inside the transaction, rather than usually saying something like send 10 Ether to Bob, now instead tells the smart contract, here's 10 Ether, please execute the deposit function. Oh, here's also the seller address who this deposit is meant for. And now remember, this is a transaction and transactions will be bundled up together by miners in blocks. So once a miner has included this transaction in a new block, the block will be distributed around the network again. And this is when the code is actually executed. The nodes receiving a new block will have to go through all transactions inside the block one after another. And when they receive the deposit transaction, they initialize a new Ethereum virtual machine for our escrow smart contract, load up the state for it, run the deposit transaction, which will change the state by storing the deposit amount for the seller address. Okay, great. So now we have a smart contract which has stored 10 Ethers for the seller Bob. What happens if the seller tries to get the money now? He would send a withdrawal transaction. But wait, stop. The withdrawal flag has not been set by the buyer yet. So during execution inside our Ethereum virtual machine, this would be detected and the transaction rejected. And so eventually the buyer enables the withdrawal and the same thing would happen. The transaction is included in a block and will change the state by setting the withdrawal flag. And now the funds are unlocked, and when the seller now sends a withdrawal transaction, it doesn't revert anymore. And the smart contract sends the funds, in this case 10 Ether, to the seller Bob. Great. We now understand how smart contracts work. But there's still one major security problem we haven't solved yet. Let's explore this in the next chapter.